So John Jones was just handed a 1-year suspension for some kind of dodgy dick pills. I don't have too much to say on the suspension. I probably would have expected it to be around half that considering Yoel Romero, but whatever. They threw the fucking book at him, nothing you can do. What I'm more interested in is Jones himself and the wider ramifications for the light heavyweight division. Light heavyweight has traditionally been the UFC's marquee division. It had most of the biggest stars in the UFC's earlier days, was generally the deepest talent pool, and has produced some of the greatest rivalries ever. There was the Tito Ortiz trash-talking, over-the-top theatrics era. There was Chuck Liddell's wicked spree of Mohawk madness, where he was just straight-up decapitating motherfuckers. I mean, that was glorious. But the big debate during those eras revolved around the fact that Pride was in full flight and absolutely killing it. They had a light heavyweight roster that, in terms of depth, let's be honest, in terms of talent, it kinda overshadowed the UFC's light heavyweight division. So the big unanswerable at the time was who is actually the best fighter in the world. Some said Chuck Liddell, some said Vanderlei, who was just terrorizing opponents. I mean, some of his victims are probably still suffering from PTSD. He destroyed a couple of little Japanese guys so bad that their great-grandchildren will probably have CTE. Others would have argued that Shogun was the main man. It was a great time to be a fan. The fights were just epic. But my favorite time for the light heavyweight division was right after Pride had folded and the UFC had basically consolidated all the biggest fighters in the world. Let me elaborate a little bit because I want to revisit this period when I'm done talking about Jones. So the period I'm talking about is right around the time of the two Shogun Machida fights. The division was completely chock full of absolute savages who were all right in their prime. The most prominent fighters of that period were Shogun, Machida, Rashad, Rampage, Forrest, and to a lesser extent Lil Nog. Some of those names might not mean much now, but at that time they were straight up terrifying. They were all super exciting, and on any given night, any one of them could have conceivably been the champion. That is a recipe for an exciting division. The belt got tossed around like it was a game of pass the fucking parcel. From Liddell to Rampage to Forrest to Rashad to Machida to Shogun. It was just an epic period in the division. My favorite. And as I said, I'll come back to it later. We all know what happened next though. Jones arrived on the scene and tore through those motherfuckers like they were nothing, in a spree of pure domination that would have previously seemed almost inconceivable. Like a big debate that gets brought up all the time is, what is the most impressive single year in MMA history? The first candidate is usually Shogun's 2005, where he went 5-0, destroying the likes of Rampage, Lil Nog, Alistair Overeem, and Ricardo Arona, on his way to winning the Pride middleweight tournament. Just an incredible year. The other big candidate is John Jones' 2011, where he went 4-0 against Ryan Bader, Shogun, Rampage, and Machida, in a year where he won the light heavyweight belt and defended it fucking twice. Now, just to weigh in on that debate, in terms of the more epic year, I'd have to hand it to Shogun. But in terms of the more impressive year, it's gotta be Jones. I mean, both guys were super impressive. But Shogun had to dig deep to pull it off. I mean, he went to absolute war with Lil Nog, one of Pride's great battles. He showed the heart of a savage in that campaign. But Jones, he just made it look easy. Watching a queue of the best fighters in the world being rendered completely ineffective and basically being molested all over the octagon, it was shocking. Anyway, I just wanted to give a brief rundown of the light heavyweight division to recap on why it's always been the big show, why we all love light heavyweight, and why it's just so frustrating to watch that division kind of dwindle away lately, particularly when you consider there's just no reason it should, outside of one guy getting smashed on drugs and partying like Charlie fucking Sheen. Jones appears to be putting so many wacky chemicals in his body that I'm surprised his piss doesn't burn a fucking hole in USADA's urine receptacles. I'd imagine they're handling Jones samples in one of them radioactive glove boxes. If it wasn't for his repeated transgressions, light heavyweight would likely have a ton of momentum. There's a whole bunch of killers. Jones, Cormier, Rumble, Gustafsson, Glover. It should be one of the most compelling divisions in the sport. But because Jones just caught a 12-month suspension, we're left with 12 months of light heavyweight title fights that just don't have the shine they should. I mean, I can't wait for Rumble Cormier too. But knowing that the best fighter on the planet is doing group sessions at the Betty fucking Ford clinic does affect the significance of that belt. Jon Jones guzzling a bunch of fucking dick pills and snorting coke has sidelined arguably the greatest pound-for-pound fighter on the planet, cost him tens of millions of dollars, robbed him of some of his absolute prime years, and completely let the air out of the light heavyweight division. I mean, I can't wait for Rumble DC, but I don't really give a shit about that belt, because the whole point of a belt is that it represents the best fighter on the planet, and very few people believe that to be the case now that Jon Jones has been stripped. Nobody's getting fucked more than Daniel Cormier though, because he may be the best light heavyweight on the planet. Jones didn't look anywhere near his best in his most recent fight. Now, you may have heard Chael comment on it. He basically said, Jon Jones looked terrible, the worst he ever has, and he still outclassed OSP, won all 5 rounds. I mean, okay, that's certainly one take on it, but here's a different one. Jon Jones has only fought once in the post-USADA era, and he looked the worst he ever did. Then in his next fight, he got popped for a banned substance. So there's several spins you can put on Jones' underwhelming performance. Mine is that yes, Jones beat OSP on his worst night, but is that really his worst night? Or is that the level Jones is now at? This is a new era, and Daniel Cormier may very well be the best light heavyweight on the planet. But until he beats Jones, he's just not gonna get that respect. So I've actually got mixed emotions on Jon Jones. I'm a fan of anyone who represents the sport at the very highest level, and no one is more high level than Jon Jones. So I have to appreciate that. And honestly, I don't give a shit about what Jones is doing in his spare time. Don't care. I don't even really care if he wants to destroy his life. That's his own business. But in terms of what the guy's doing to the light heavyweight division, it's like, Jesus Christ, John, what the fuck are you doing here? Will someone please just drag his ass out of the crack house and back to the fucking gym? I don't think I can sum up that frustration any better than Daniel Cormier.
Jon Jones, get your together, I'm waiting for you.
Well said, DC. But enough of that bullshit. There is a silver lining of sorts. The reason I went into depth about that glorious period at light heavyweight, where it was a bunch of super exciting, evenly matched, all in their prime savages, any of whom could have conceivably held the belt, was because that is almost exactly the scenario at middleweight right now. The top 5, Bisping, Weidman, Rockhold, Jacare, and Yoel, are basically a bunch of fucking monsters who are all incredibly exciting, and on any given night, any one of these guys could be the best in the world. Additionally, Gay God looks like he's on the rise. I've previously discussed what a bad motherfucker he is, so it's no stretch to imagine him holding the belt in the near future. Plus, you've got the Kennedy and Rashad fight. If Kennedy wins, having already molly-whopped the fuck out of Bisping, he'd basically slide right into contention, adding another member to the long queue and turning the heat up another notch at middleweight. If Rashad wins, then he suddenly becomes significant at middleweight and potentially brings a huge spotlight with him. Rashad's been inactive lately, and he's on a bit of a rocky stretch, but he was a huge star in his prime. I mean, he broke 1 million pay-per-view buys when he fought Rampage in a non-title fight with a mediocre main card. That's actually mind-blowing when you look back at it. So if he could get some kind of resurgence going on at middleweight, that would be fucking epic. Regardless though, we're right in the middle of the most exciting and competitive period in the division's history. So even though light heavyweight has lost some of its shine, middleweight is stepping up big time to fill the void as the UFC's marquee division for the big men. The belt is being thrown around like a fucking frisbee. The potential matchups, the rematches, the beefs, and the bad bloods, the exciting styles these guys have, it's all just fucking outstanding. This is the greatest cast of characters the middleweight division has ever assembled, and I am in the front row to see how the dust finally settles.